Hello and welcome, Ken and John. It's lovely to see you both.
It's great to see you, Kat. Yeah.
Great. Kent Zimmermann is a principal at Zukauser Group, and John Morris is a managing editor at special projects at a major global law firm. And together, they are the authors of our new special report, Law Firm Mergers, Lessons from Successful Strategic Combinations, which has just been released today. Congratulations to you both. How does it feel to see the title published?
Feels great. I think you could see the relief on our faces, John, I think.
And we were so happy. The design of it, just the whole package looked great when it was done.
Great. Yeah, no, it's absolutely great content in there, including a preface by Peter Zukauser, in which he shares how he thinks this special report sets itself apart from other literature on this topic. But perhaps you could tell us a little bit about how you see this report as different and why you chose to take that approach.
So maybe I'll start on this, and I know John has thoughts too. First of all, Peter is a great partner of ours in Zimmermann Group, and more importantly, a really good friend for many years. And he makes the point in his foreword in the book that you're not going to find checklists and to-do lists and the in the weeds technicalities of documenting a law firm merger. Those books have been written before. This really is a book about how to identify combination partners that would produce a successful combination, and how to go about having the conversations in a way that interests those firms in a combination, and also how to build consensus within your firm to do something transformative. Many law firms, they do quite well. In fact, we often say they succeed in spite of themselves sometimes, but they do very well. And often the feeling among rank and file partners is, well, we kind of like who we are. Why should we change? Why do anything differently? And so it's often a heavy lift to help partners in a firm understand the evolving competitive landscape, the value of combining, how that could fast forward the partnership's aspirations. In some cases, not always, but in some cases, that's the way to go for a stronger firm for the future. And so we focus on the parts of the deal that often make or break whether or not you get to a successful deal. Where deals are made and lost is how I would say it. John, I don't know if you would say more than that.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. It's a book very much focused on the people issues and how to get people to confront what may be difficult choices, how to build a consensus to do something that's fairly dramatic that may change their day-to-day practice in some ways. And these are businesses that are all about people. It's not some manufacturing enterprise where you buy a couple factories and you tack it on to your existing business. This is about getting teams of professionals to work together and collaborate, because that's the point of doing a deal like these.
Yeah, that's great. I think you may have alluded the answer to our next question already, but the report sort of talks about how mergers have increased in number in recent years. In your opinion, what are the key challenges for law firm leaders who are thinking about a merger, and how does your report try to address those?
So law firms have typically an ambition to be a stronger version of themselves. That's most partners in firms generally like the firm. They kind of like who they are as a firm, but they want to be a stronger version, meaning they want to be a little higher profile in some ways, get more at bats for great lawyers in matters, and they want to be a little higher performing financially. And they want to have more depth in certain areas of focus, certain practices, sector teams, certain cities. And so to become a stronger version of themselves, they usually need to grow high quality depth in chosen areas that they're focused on. One way to do that is up to the ranks associates. Another way to do that is laterals and groups of laterals if they can get high quality ones. And then a third way is combinations, either making an acquisition or a merger of equals, or sometimes combining with a larger firm. And so there's limited options, how to get stronger, how to grow. And what many firms find is that absent a merger, if they're just growing organically with associates, or they're just building brick by brick with laterals or small groups, that net of retirements and other attrition, the growth is slow going. It's not, the net growth is not enough, fast enough. And so then they look at combinations as a way to really accelerate and move the needle and catch up sometimes with aspirational peers on profile, on the size of their net income, on their market position. And so that's often what law firms want to tackle. And they usually have a limited field of options on which combination partners would make sense. And so in the book, John and I talk about how it really makes sense to cast a very wide net and to get in the driver's seat, not just to respond to calls that come in and firms that might call from time to time, or recruiters might call from time to time, but instead be the moving party, cast a wide net, determine what criteria another firm would need to meet to be considered by your firm, and then identify which firms meet those criteria. Learn as much as possible. Which firms do you have shared clients with? Which ones would advance you on the league tables that are important to you, and so forth. And then get to know those firms, sometimes engaging those firms in discussion, helping them understand why it's in their interest to get to know your firm, sometimes informed by outside advisors who might know the cultures of those firms, know the priorities of those firms. And so we tackle all of that in this book in a digestible and because of John, a really easy to read, straightforward way of describing it.
Yeah, I definitely think it has some, as you say, sir, a great style, very easy to read, very digestible. And in amongst all that great advice, you also have interviews with law firm leaders who have gone through mergers and combined their firms successfully. How did you find interviewing those leaders, and what do you think that adds to your writing?
I want to take that.
Yeah, I thought it was very striking. Two things were striking. One was particularly when we interviewed people together who had been from opposite sides of the merger, how much they respected each other and how fond they were for each other, of each other. And part of that, of course, we're interviewing them after the deal is done. This has been a bonding experience. And we were talking to people who'd done successful deals. But I think it also reflected something else that came out in those interviews, was that on both sides, the people who made these deals work, they approached it as a collaboration from the outset. They didn't approach it as a negotiation where they were just trying to win the best deal for themselves. They went into it saying, "Hey, look, how could we make this work together?" And they extended themselves. They made it clear to the other side they were not being selfish, and they understood that the way they conducted the talks before they went into a deal was a signal to the other side of how they would approach being partners together. And it was also, for each side, it was a test, in a way, of the trust and collaboration. And that came through very, very strongly. And it years ago, when I was reporting on law firm mergers, that I hadn't thought about it at the time, but these interviews made me look back to those stories and those deals. And the same thing was true there. People liked each other and they trusted each other going into the deals, and that's what made them work.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it was gratifying to do those interviews because on many of the deals, we had advised on the deals at the time. And then when conducting the interviews for the book, we were having a little reunion and getting back together with the chairs of the firms that had come together and are now partners in one firm. And it was great to hear from them on the value that they and their partners and their clients have released from the deal. We hear from partners and firms. It's funny, John, I don't think I had a chance to tell you this, but the day before yesterday, I got an email from a partner at Foley Gardere, one of the mergers that we wrote about in the book. And he said, I just want to let you know that was the best deal in one of the greatest things that's ever happened in my professional life. And he said, I can't believe for how long we considered not doing a deal like that. It's really, in the rearview mirror, the greatest thing we could have done. And so those kinds of reports after a deal really gratifying, and we got some of that in the discussions. We also got a lot of candor, though, including from some people who talked about, hey, if I'm honest with myself, there's some things we could have done a little better in the deal and we would do differently next time. And so it was balanced, and I was impressed with the candor.
I think what one of the other surprising things that came out in several of those interviews was, a merger is disruptive. It means new procedures. There's a lot of energy, time that goes into making it work, particularly in the first year or two. But one of the things that came out was people said often this was energizing. It wasn't just that partners didn't react to it just as a frustration and new bureaucracy and so on, that it made them look at their practices in different ways because they now had new colleagues who might be able to add expertise. And it just kind of reawakened partners to the need to think strategically and to start afresh in a way. We heard that from 2 or 3 of the people unprompted. That was surprising.
Yeah, I agree. And they also talked about how it was really a shot in the arm and an energizer to do the deal. And they thought it would be good, and they thought that they would come together and start to pitch clients together and have joint pursuits. But they were taken with how much activity and opportunity the deal generated and how quickly that was a common theme in those interviews.
Because we talked about, a lot of these firms monitored work after the deal, monitored how much work was shared from, a partner or an office of firm A, and brought in people from firm B, the old firm B. And several of them said they were amazed. They were shocked at how many of those matters there were, even within 6 months, which was really a sign that the rank and file had bought into the deal and were supportive of it and enthusiastic about it.
Yeah, they track in a lot of these deals what they call but-for matters, meaning matters that they wouldn't have brought into the firm but for having combined, but for having done the merger. And they were taken with how much success they had with but-for matters, but-for clients, and measured that, and was one way that they measured the value and the success of the deal.
That's amazing. It must have been really lovely to hear that from previous clients and people who have gone through mergers. And I suppose final question, for any law firm leaders out there who want that collaborative, energizing, successful merger in their future, what would be your key piece of advice for them?
So, I think where we would start is get in the driver's seat. There's a whole chapter on this in the book where we describe how most law firms, they get incoming inquiries kind of over the transom from a friend in another firm, or a recruiter will call and say, hey, you should get to know this firm. They would like to get to know you. And while it's one thing to be reactive to inquiries that come in, it's really much more valuable to get in the driver's seat, decide what you and your firm would benefit from in a merger, what practice strengths the other firm ideally brings to the table, what sector strengths, what geographic strengths, what kind of deal lists and litigation wins and so forth, and then develop some criteria and identify the firms that do the things that you want, that would create value for you and your firm and your partners at the deal. And so getting in the driver's seat, identifying the firms that would help fast forward the achievement of your partner's aspirations, and then learning more about those firms, prioritizing that list, and getting to know some of the highest priority firms. That's really what we would do. And we would also say that, you can do some of that is publicly available and you can do on your own, but often helpful to have a well-informed advisor, somebody you're comfortable with, who really knows the market, who knows these firms, and can tell you what they're thinking in their firm, what their priorities are, what their culture is like, how their compensation works, what their capital requirements are, and things that aren't public, so you can assess fit. Part of the reason why it's valuable to do that, in addition to finding the right fit, is that we find partners in most firms don't have an unlimited reservoir of patience to go down rabbit holes and not get to a deal too many times. And so it's really helpful to be well informed, including about non-public information that helps you rule out the firms that really aren't going to get to a deal and instead focus on the ones that both address your priorities and that are feasible, and focus on those ones. So that's some of the advice we give. John, what am I leaving out, John?
Well, I think there's another way in which the takeaway from the whole book might be, don't be content with the status quo. Put the energy into developing a strategy that makes sense for your existing firm to improve it. And then, if that strategy leads you to think about a combination, then put the energy into creating the best options for yourself. And don't, step out of the rut. Don't just assume everything should continue on the way it is, because, your market position may be eroded, and that's the downside, but also that there could be huge upside if you can find a good partner to combine with to achieve the right goals.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, in many firms, there's quite a bit of success, especially in recent years. Most firms have performed a lot better than they thought they would going into the last 2-3 years. And in most firms, there's reason to be proud of that, be delighted with performance, but also there's a need not to be complacent because other firms are doing well too. And those that started off a higher base going into the last few years, assuming they in your firm are doing similarly, they're pulling away if they started off a higher base because they're benefiting from compounding over time. And so I think it's a good idea to look out on the horizon and say, if things keep going how they're going, are we going to be happy with our competitive position in 3, 5, 10 years? Or do we want to do something differently? Do we want to get more focused in the kind of growth and in the areas in which we're growing? Some firms can do that without considering a merger, and that's something we talk about in the book. Other firms benefit from putting all the options on the table, and they're all going to have advantages and disadvantages. Sometimes good to unpack what those are and pursue the best available. Sometimes good to pursue multiple alternatives at the same time on parallel tracks. And so we go through that. But the industry, no question about it, changing rapidly, getting more competitive for talent, and no time to be complacent.
Now, I have a question for you, Kent. Do you think a higher proportion of mergers are successful today than they were 10 or 20 years ago? And if so, why? Have people learned lessons about how to make them work?
It's a great question. I think that there are some very successful deals in the past 10 years, and we talk about some of them in the book. There also were successful deals many years ago, including some that Peter covers in the foreword, involving some fabulous market-leading firms. Some of the biggest, most profitable firms are originally the result of mergers, as we described. I do think that people are learning from what's gone well and what could have gone better in other deals. Some they did, some others. I think that they're realizing that it pays to be very strategic in deciding what kind of merger would advance your interests. In other words, more and more firms are realizing if we merge, we shouldn't just do it to get bigger, but we should revisit what are we trying to achieve without a merger? What does our strategic plan say? Where are we trying to go as a firm? And then in that context, firms are realizing we really should look at mergers to advance progress to getting to where we're already trying to go in our plan. And so I think more firms are doing that. I think more firms are realizing that culture is paramount. And as you pointed out, you're not just doing a deal and then walking away. You're doing a deal and becoming partners who need to trust each other and work together to serve clients. And so I think culture and the importance of fit and how to assess fit, that's becoming clear to more firms. So I think those things are producing more successful deals. I also think it's hard to figure out sometimes whether deals were successful or not, because a measure of success depends in part on what would have happened if the firm didn't do the deal, and where it started from, and what its alternatives were absent a merger. And so in the book, we talk about how some of these firms that merged, they did it to achieve aspirations that weren't widely clear, but that ticked all of their boxes. Whether it was firms hoping to get to number one in the global league tables in certain types of deals for certain sectors and doing that because of a deal. There's one firm that did that we talked to, or whether it was another firm that wanted to grow their corporate practice and significantly amp up their presence in a particular geography, and they took care of that objective with a merger. And so I think knowing the success of these things, sometimes knowing what boxes the firms are trying to check by getting the deals done and what interests they were trying to advance.
Well, lots of food for thought there, our customers. And all that's left for me to say is thank you so much both for your time today. And we look forward to our customers and seeing your report and learning lots from it. Just a taste of what we've heard today.
Thanks, Kat, very much. Thanks for the opportunity to work with you and the rest of the team to get the book to market. And we're excited to hear from people and hear what they think of it.
Yeah.
Likewise. Thank you very much.
Thanks.